In this episode, we start with a part of information protection that sounds ordinary until the day it becomes the only thing standing between a company and real operational damage. Data backup, storage, and restoration are not glamorous topics, but they sit behind some of the most important recovery decisions any organization will ever make. When people lose access to customer records, payroll files, design documents, contracts, or system configurations, the question is not whether the data was valuable, because that becomes obvious immediately. The real question is whether the organization prepared for loss before the loss happened. For a brand new learner, that is the right place to begin, because backup is not just a technical routine and restoration is not just pushing data back into place. Together, they represent a discipline of preserving information, protecting business operations, and creating confidence that a mistake, failure, attack, or disaster does not become a permanent ending. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting point is to separate three ideas that people often blend together. Backup means creating a copy of data so it can be recovered later if the original is lost, damaged, altered, or deleted. Storage is the broader idea of where data lives during normal use and where backup copies are kept over time, which means storage includes everyday production environments as well as protected repositories designed for retention and recovery. Restoration is the act of bringing that backed up data back into use, whether that means recovering one deleted file, rebuilding a damaged database, or returning an entire system to an operational state. Those differences matter because an organization can have a great deal of storage and still have weak backups, or it can have many backup jobs running and still be poor at restoration. A future auditor has to understand that these are related but distinct control areas, and a beginner should hear that early so the subject never feels like one giant blurry concept. Once those definitions are clear, the next question is why organizations care so much about this area. The simplest reason is that data loss happens far more often than beginners imagine, and it does not require a dramatic cyber attack to become serious. A staff member can overwrite a spreadsheet, a developer can deploy bad code that damages records, a device can fail without warning, a power event can corrupt files, or malicious software can encrypt information and make it unusable. Even routine changes can create silent damage, especially when bad data is copied across connected systems before anyone realizes there is a problem. This is why people in security and audit do not treat backups as optional housekeeping. They treat them as a basic resilience control because organizations do not just need their data to exist in theory. They need it to remain usable, trustworthy, and recoverable under stress, when time matters and normal operations are already under pressure. Another important idea for beginners is that not every copy of data counts as a true backup. Many organizations synchronize data between systems for convenience or availability, and that can be helpful, but a synchronized copy may faithfully reproduce the same corruption, deletion, or malicious encryption that affected the original. Replication improves continuity in some situations, yet it is not the same as a protected backup copy that can take the organization back to an earlier clean state. That distinction explains why backup strategies usually involve versions taken at different times rather than one constantly updated mirror of current data. It also explains why administrators often combine full backups with smaller incremental or differential backups to balance speed, storage consumption, and recovery needs. A full backup captures everything selected at that point in time, while the other approaches reduce repetition by focusing on what changed. The beginner does not need to memorize every operational detail yet, but it is important to understand that backup design is always a trade-off between completeness, efficiency, and the ability to restore quickly when it matters. The timing of backups matters just as much as the type of backup, because data has value over time, not only as a static object. Some information changes every few minutes, while other records change only occasionally, and that difference shapes how often protected copies should be created. Two ideas help explain this well. Recovery point objective, RPO, and recovery time objective, RTO. RPO describes how much data loss an organization is willing to tolerate, measured as a period of time, while RTO describes how quickly a system or data set needs to be restored after disruption. If a payroll system can only tolerate a tiny amount of lost transaction data, the RPO must be short, which usually means backups or protected snapshots need to occur more frequently. If a public-facing service must be brought back very quickly, the RTO becomes demanding, which influences storage placement, restoration planning, and the overall design of the recovery process. These ideas connect business expectations to technical choices, and that connection is central to both security thinking and audit evaluation. Storage decisions shape backup quality in ways that are easy to overlook when someone only thinks about capacity. It is not enough to have a place where copies can sit. The organization needs storage that supports integrity, durability, accessibility, and cost control over time. Some storage options are fast but expensive, some are slower but cheaper for long retention, and some are designed to remain disconnected or harder to alter so they can survive ransomware and insider misuse. That means the storage conversation includes much more than device type. It includes where the copies reside, how long they stay there, how likely they are to degrade or become unreadable, and how quickly they can be brought back into use during restoration. This is one reason mature organizations often use several storage tiers instead of one giant bucket for everything. Daily operational recoveries may rely on one kind of repository, while longer-term protected archives may sit in a different environment designed for lower cost and greater separation from the production systems that created the data. Location also matters because the same event can damage both the original data and the backup if they are too closely tied together. If production systems and backup copies sit in the same physical room, the same building fire, flood, theft, or environmental failure may destroy both at once. If they share the same logical environment and access permissions, the same compromised account or malicious software may encrypt or delete both at once. That is why organizations often spread protected copies across different places and different kinds of storage, rather than trusting a single convenient repository. A common principle is to maintain multiple copies, keep them on more than one storage medium, and ensure at least one protected copy is stored separately from normal operations. The logic is simple even if the infrastructure behind it can become complex. Real resilience comes from separation, because separation reduces the chance that one failure mode will erase every recovery option at the same moment. As soon as backup copies contain important information, they become information assets that need protection in their own right. Many beginners focus on availability alone and assume the only purpose of a backup is to be there when needed, but confidentiality and integrity matter just as much. Backup media can hold customer data, financial records, employee information, authentication material, intellectual property, and system configurations, so unauthorized access to backup repositories can become a serious breach. That is why encryption, restricted access, monitoring, separation of duties, and secure handling practices apply to backups just as they do to production systems. A strong backup environment should make it difficult for one person to silently alter, destroy, or exfiltrate protected copies. In audit terms, this means reviewing not only whether backups exist, but also who can access them, who can delete them, whether those actions are logged, and whether the organization treats backup data as sensitive information rather than just forgotten copies collecting dust somewhere in the background. Retention is another concept that reveals how backup and storage decisions connect directly to business, legal, and operational realities. Not all data should be kept forever, and not all data can safely be discarded too quickly. Some records must remain available for defined periods because of contracts, regulations, litigation risk, internal policy, or ordinary business need, while other data may create unnecessary cost or exposure if retained longer than necessary. This means a backup strategy is never just about copying data. It is also about deciding how many versions exist, how long each version stays available, and when information moves from active recovery storage into longer-term archival storage or is properly destroyed. Versioning matters here because it allows an organization to recover not only the most recent state, but also prior states from earlier points in time. That can be critical when corruption is discovered late, when an accidental deletion went unnoticed for days, or when investigators need to understand what information existed before a harmful change occurred. Good retention design supports recovery, compliance, and operational clarity at the same time. When restoration begins, the focus shifts from preservation to controlled recovery, and that is where many weak programs reveal themselves. Restoring data is not always a simple act of copying files back into place, because organizations may need to rebuild operating systems, reconnect databases, reestablish application dependencies, validate access rights, and confirm that restored information is both complete and trustworthy. Sometimes the need is small, such as recovering one user folder. In other cases, restoration may involve entire servers, virtual environments, line of business applications, or large stores of records that support revenue generation, customer service, or safety functions. The quality of the restoration process depends on preparation made long before the incident occurred. Documentation, ownership, sequence, priority, and communication all matter, because restoring the wrong system first or restoring correct data into a broken environment may waste precious time. For that reason, restoration is best understood not as a technical afterthought, but as the operational proof that the backup strategy was designed around actual business needs. An important lesson for beginners is that restoration success is not measured by whether a backup job completed without an error message. It is measured by whether usable data can be recovered within the time and quality expectations that the business requires. A backup report may look healthy while the real restoration path remains broken because credentials expired, software versions changed, dependencies were overlooked, storage media became unreadable, or the team never practiced recovering the most important systems together. This is why testing matters so much. Organizations that regularly test file recovery, system recovery, and selected larger restoration scenarios learn where their assumptions are weak before a real crisis forces the issue. They also build confidence in people, not only in technology, because stressful events expose confusion about roles and sequence just as quickly as they expose technical gaps. A mature environment treats restore testing as evidence gathering and learning, not as a symbolic checkbox designed only to satisfy a policy statement. Another common misunderstanding is the belief that more backups automatically mean better protection. Quantity can help, but without smart design, it can also create noise, cost, confusion, and false confidence. If backup windows interfere with operations, if repositories are full, if retention periods are inconsistent, or if nobody can quickly identify which copy is authoritative for a given restoration need, the organization may still struggle when something goes wrong. Another misconception is that cloud storage alone solves the backup problem. Remote storage can be an excellent component of a strategy, but it does not eliminate the need to define scope, retention, access control, immutability, restoration priorities, and testing. The core lesson is that backup, storage, and restoration are governance decisions expressed through technology. Good outcomes come from clear requirements and disciplined execution, not from assuming that buying more capacity or outsourcing copies to a distant provider somehow removes the need for thoughtful design and oversight. For someone studying from an audit perspective, this topic becomes especially important because backup and recovery controls are visible across policy, operations, and evidence. An auditor wants to know whether the organization identified critical data, assigned ownership, defined retention expectations, aligned frequency with business need, restricted access to backup repositories, monitored failures, and tested restoration with enough realism to support trust. Evidence may include backup schedules, job reports, exception handling records, restore test results, retention policies, change records, and interviews with the people responsible for maintaining the process. What matters is not only whether controls exist on paper, but whether the control environment shows consistency between business requirements and actual practice. If the organization claims it can restore critical systems quickly yet has never validated that claim under realistic conditions, the gap is meaningful. This is where audit helps by turning assumptions into questions and turning recovery promises into verifiable control evidence that leaders can actually rely on. The topic also connects to broader information protection in ways that beginners will keep seeing as they move forward. Data classification influences which information deserves the strongest recovery protection. Risk assessment influences how much loss or downtime is acceptable. Access control influences who can administer repositories and who can request restoration. Change management influences whether new systems are included in existing backup routines or accidentally left unprotected. Incident response influences how restoration occurs after malicious activity, because an organization must avoid restoring infected or compromised data back into production. These connections are worth noticing because they show that backup is not an isolated technical task performed in a corner. It is part of a larger system of governance and resilience where information assets are identified, protected, monitored, and recovered according to business importance rather than convenience alone. That systems view is one of the habits that separates shallow familiarity from real understanding. The biggest idea to carry forward is that data backup, storage, and restoration are about preserving an organization's ability to continue functioning when things go wrong. A backup is only useful if it captures the right data at the right time, lives in storage that remains protected and accessible, and can be restored in a way that returns trustworthy information to the people and systems that need it. Storage is not just a place to put copies, and restoration is not just a recovery button waiting to be pressed. Each part depends on decisions about business value, timing, separation, protection, retention, and testing. For a new learner, that is the foundation that matters most, because once you understand these concepts clearly, later topics like continuity planning and disaster recovery stop feeling abstract. They begin to look like connected layers of the same underlying responsibility, making sure important information can survive loss and support recovery when the organization needs it most.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.